Too bad. Anyway, we'll see what happens.
This is me. Hello, you're here. I don't know. It Voila. So good. It's hard when they're not in alphabetical
I know,
order
I was kind
anymore.
of like confused about.
Oh my gosh.
Good, you have a great holiday?
Are we almost ready to begin? We're good to go?
Channel 18's all set.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 26, 2023 meeting of the Local Comprehensive Planning Committee. It is 5 p.m. and we are live in the Barnstable Town Hall. This meeting is being called to order, and the meeting is being recorded and broadcast on Channel 18 in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. The committee must inquire whether anyone is taping this meeting and to please make their presence known. Okay, not seeing anyone. So before we kick off, I'd like to take a moment to have our committee members say hello and introduce themselves, and I'll start on this end. Francis, please.
Fran Parks Katuitt.
Megan Moore at Marston's Mills.
Carlos Barboza Hyannis.
And Jennifer Williams, Osterville.
Amanda Converse, Marston's Mills.
Wendy Northcross, West Barnstable.
Felicia Penn, Hyannis.
Cheryl Powell, Centerville.
Avery Revere, Barnstable.
Twist, Osterville.
Steve Costello, Osterville.
Sue Rohrbach, Centerville.
Lindsay Council, Centerville.
And thank you, everybody. Topic for discussion tonight. First order of business is the approval of our minutes from December 8th, 2022. If I could have a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll move it.
Second.
Second. And a show of hands, all in favor? Aye, it's unanimous. Minutes have been approved. And at this point, an update on our 2010 Local Comprehensive Plan goals and strategies and existing conditions work. And I believe that would be Mr. Jim Kupfer is going to walk us through that. Thank you, Jim.
Good evening, everybody. Jim Kupfer, Senior Planner, Planning and Development. I get the opportunity to start us off here this evening. Before we get into the presentation, just want to go through our package. We already have the minutes that you've reviewed and approved. I do want to note that we do have our 2010 LCP goals and strategies progress summaries. In addition to this is a PDF that was sent to you via email with the full list of goals with notes included in those. Please reach out to me if you would like a print copy. Happy to do so. It's just a lot of pages. I want to say 70 pages or so. And it's best read in color because there's a lot of different things going on. So didn't want to kill any trees if it didn't have to, but it's an important document. So if you do want it in print, please let me know after the meeting or tomorrow or whenever, and I'm happy to print those out for you. Beyond that, Kate later on is going to get into our public comment for phase one. So this is the culmination of our 5 months of crisscrossing the town and going to events and villages and getting a lot of great input. A lot of work in here. So please take a moment to review, and any questions we're happy to answer as well. Later on, we'll be discussing our visioning workshop that will take place later next month and the following month. And this is just a draft agenda that we'll get into detail. And then finally, what we're all slowly working on to get to is the 2010 vision and our starting point for updating this vision, utilizing all the great work that you have in this packet and all the packets that were provided before you. So quickly, I will begin our presentation discussing the agenda. So the agenda here, I'll touch on the 2010 goals and strategies and existing conditions and hand it off to our great consulting team, Barrett Group, who will dive further into the existing conditions work to date. That will be followed by reviewing the visioning engagement that's happened to date and the further work that we do have still. Later, Elizabeth and I will discuss the Bringing It Together meeting and how it will all come together, and we're seeking your input on that process. And then lastly, our standing update on the housing needs assessment and housing production plan. So first, I'll just touch on the 2010 goals and strategies. As I mentioned, this is a real big document. This isn't meant to be read. This is just the image of the document that you have been provided via email, outlining all the goals that have been provided to date. So if you recall, you have a document that was provided to you a few months back, and that is the goals and strategies that have been updated by all of our planning department, or all of our departments and department heads. This document expands upon that to the full list of 2010 goals and strategies. As we heard from the last meeting, there's a number of goals and strategies that haven't been achieved really. And so what we started to do in looking at the full list is a yes/no column, quickly realizing the value began to be lost in the shades of gray that comes from our goals and strategies designed in 2010 and the unfortunate development of those where we don't really have really hard metrics to say clearly yes and no. And I personally felt like I was overstepping and stating a hard yes or no if in fact it had many shades of gray. So I provided you with the full list of goals that we can have more conversation on as we develop into phase two. The lesson learned there, I think, from the goals and strategies of 2010 in terms of developing goals that are specifically important, meaning that we limit our goals to the things that we feel are the most valuable, most important. Not only that, but also confirming when we're done with developing our goals and strategies that we clearly have an ability to provide performance metrics for those goals and strategies. Because I think that's a little bit of what's being lost here, but we can work through that as we're developing into phase two and understanding the 2010 goals and how we can move forward into our 2023 goals and which ones are going to come forward from those. However, what we have provided you with are subject summaries, looking at each of the subjects, each section of the local comprehensive plan that was done in 2010, and developed out summaries of the items that have been achieved and those that have not been achieved, that are clearly defined. There are a lot of gaps in there, and that's the things we're going to have to work through as we work through phase two. So with that there, again, it's a very big document. I'm happy to print it out for you. And also, as you're going through those, if you have specific questions, please reach out. I'm happy to sit down. And a lot of you I know worked on the 2010 plan or have been working on maybe one of the goals or strategies since the 2010 plan. So happy to sit down with you all that have that real life experience and can help guide this committee as we're working through to phase two. So with that, before we get into existing conditions, do you have any questions on what we have before us? Excellent. So now I'll hand it off to our consulting group, Barrett Planning Group, who will go over existing conditions.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much. So thank you all for coming out tonight. It's great to have a full house. And for those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Carly. I'm with Barrett Planning Group, and we are the firm partnering with the town of Barnstable on the local comprehensive plan, Phase 1. So before we go ahead and turn our existing conditions over to the town staff, we wanted to make sure that we gave you an overarching overview of just how this is organized, who we spoke to, what our process was, and then kind of entice you to open up another big document, because this is acting as kind of a movie trailer, trying to get you to see just enough where you think it's funny, great, quippy, and then you go ahead and read it later on. So a local comprehensive plan is officially 6 parts in order to be certified by the Cape Cod Commission. Vision statement, existing conditions, goals, capital facilities plan, housing plan, targeted action plan. Our role in Phase 1 is the vision statement and vision statement and existing conditions. So the vision statement is officially a statement expresses the shared values of the community for future growth, development, resource protection, and represents a growth policy for the community. Change is certain in a community, right? And this is just a way to deal with that, provide, a different roadmap to make sure that the community is ready. Existing conditions sounds pretty vague, right? But it's really everything that Barnstable is in its current state. It's a quantitative and qualitative overview after plenty of research, interviews, and public engagement, organized by natural, built, and community systems as outlined by the Cape Cod Commission once again. So throughout the fall, we conducted quite a few community interviews. We pulled together town experts across departments with the help of town staff. That included public safety departments, Department of Public Works, natural resource officers, members of the Cape Cod Commission, regional transportation partners, historic resource leaders, economic development leaders in the community, you name it, we spoke with them, either in the chambers right over here or via Zoom. Some of you were even on the calls, which was really exciting. While we were doing that, you were all becoming community engagement experts. The last time I was up here, I was preparing you to do that, right? And I think you did an excellent job after going through a lot of those resources that Kate sent out. You went out to civic association meetings, took general public comments, put up comment walls, you name it, you were there. It was really great to see a lot of the updates. So we really appreciate that because in culmination, everything comes down to the 3 systems, right? Starting with natural systems. Each of these sections is broken down even further into different parts. So groundwater, marine waters, fresh waters and lakes, ponds, wetland resources, open space, and habitat. Like I said, this is supposed to be a little bit like a movie trailer. So we want to make sure that you're enticed. We have a little bit here to talk about from a very broad overview. The section covers everything from town waters to marine waters, and we went through a lot of your existing plans. So that includes Coastal Resources Management Plan, Hazard Mitigation Plan, focused on the 3 bays to the Centerville River systems. I became an expert on vernal pools in an afternoon with the help of our subcontractor, Horsley Witten Group, who actually specializes in this. I took on a lot of learning in a lot of the coastal environments. It was really exciting to learn that much about Barnstable because when I come down here, I get to see all of you, or I get to go in Zoom meetings, or I don't get to explore too much. So exploring via maps was really exciting. Other aspects of this plan include looking at existing conditions for critical coastal habitats, mooring fields, public and private navigation channels, docks and piers, all with the intent that water-dependent uses would be allowed or limited based on the data that we found. So we were kind of ground truthing this, right? We were talking to your natural resource officers and getting a hold on the data so then we could see what was implemented over the past 10 years and move forward and go ahead and implement something that was meaningful for the next 10 years. When we look at open space in Barnstable, I found all the mountain bike trails that I ever could want to explore, right? I'm not a big mountain biker. You won't see me on one, but there's plenty, and it's a really integral part to the community of Barnstable. Lands held by the water districts for drinking water protection represent a large portion of the undeveloped land in Barnstable. Working landscapes, including local farms, cranberry bogs, are also an integral place for Barnstable's landscape. Collectively, these properties represent a long history in conservation efforts. You should be very proud of the efforts that your town has gone through. And they continue to go ahead and protect significant habitats as development poses a major threat. So a particular concern is subdivision tracts, land for residences, which can replace native vegetation with impervious surfaces such as lawns. But the town continues to undertake measures to address these threats. We welcome any of your questions throughout this. I know we're giving you a lot of information right up front, but for lack of better words, to not get into the weeds or wetlands or vernal pools or bogs, we can save those towards the end, or I can continue to make dad jokes for you. So moving on to the built systems. This section covers quite a few things: land use and development, drinking water supplies, wastewater management, stormwater management, transportation networks, utilities, and public services. So as the center of commerce and population across Cape Cod, it's especially important that Barnstable protects, preserves, and restores the resources that they're in charge of and remains mindful of how development may impact them. A large part of land use and development is promoting development and redevelopment where infrastructure can support it. So where impacts from climate change, sea level rise, flooding, and other hazards are minimized already, and then in ways that contribute to the Commonwealth's greenhouse gas reduction goals. That's a big part of Barnstable's policies moving forward. It's no easy task, but Barnstable has tremendous duty to current and future residents to be good stewards of its land by balancing human and environmental imperatives. So, Barnstable went ahead and followed the Cape Cod Commission's suggestion as of 2020 to advance wastewater management mechanisms through the CWMP. This plan calls for the town sewer collection system to expand by approximately 190 miles. Hearing some of the updates over the past couple months, it's hard to keep up, but speaking to DPW representatives was really helpful. Your town really came together as experts, and they helped us ground truth these results even further. So Barnstable is addressing nutrient removal, pond protection, drinking water protection, economic development, and other wastewater concerns all at the same time. Moving on to community systems. Another brief overview, but this one's very exciting because it's near and dear, and it's what many people think about when they think about planning. It covers population, housing, cultural and historic resources, and the local economy. So according to the census, the fun data I got to dig in through for this process, Barnstable's population in 2020 was 48,916, which is an 8.2% increase since 2010. There was a slight dip between 2000 and 2010, but altogether there was an increase of 2.3% since 2000. So you're in an upward trajectory. Barnstable's home to 20,613 households, which is a 7.2% increase since 2010, with the third largest household size on the Cape behind Sandwich and Bourne. When taking a look further into school enrollment, Barnstable Public Schools had the highest enrollment in 2019 and 2020, and then in the 2022-2023 school year, total enrollment was down 4% from that peak. Looking at the diversity across Barnstable, it's the most racially and ethnically diverse community, with about 18% of Barnstable's population born outside of the United States. As part of this process, we worked with the ongoing housing production plan in tandem to kind of pull out some of their trends and analyze current trends. So on top of this, we can pull out some of the 2010 LCP strategies that were implemented. We saw that you adopted the Housing Development Incentive Program in 2018. You went ahead and established a housing committee. You developed a process to support friendly 40Bs, and you actively rezoned to promote infill development in downtown Hyannis. You were busy, right? The town was very busy over the past 10 years, and it's fantastic to see it. Otherwise, looking at cultural and historic resources, Barnstable is rich with historic resources. Speaking to some of the local leaders, it was great to see that there are 14 national registered districts within its borders, 63 buildings, 3 objects, and 2 sites are individually listed in the National Register. And then on top of this, Barnstable's National Register listings far surpass any other communities on the Cape, and they account for 40% of the county. So you're doing really well upholding these, restoring sites, keeping them in excellent condition, and then you're further encouraging them to be upheld through these resources having zoning protections, such as zoning ordinances that permit the conversion of single-family homes to bed and breakfast establishments by special permit. So finally, looking at the exciting thing, local economy, which no one can ever pin down, right? What is economic development, as Felicia has said before? It's hard to point out, right? But to give you an idea, just looking at employment by sector, Barnstable is up there with a lot of your communities on the Cape with private sector employment. You're looking at 61.2% being employed by the private sector. And then you're also distinguished in having 15.1% of your population being self-employed, which is a higher statistic compared to your other communities on Cape Cod. Overall, wages in Barnstable are only 83% of the state average, while workers in industries such as information, agriculture, and wholesale trade earn more than their counterparts statewide. So there are quite a few interesting trends in Barnstable, but that's what I'll give you for tonight, so you can dig into that more in the report and crack another large document open. Hopefully we won't have to print that one because it will be a lot of pages, and we took a lot of nice photos, so hopefully you can see those in color too.
We want to know what the 3 historic objects are.
So I don't have those with me tonight, but I can dig into the report on my
You're just going to
computer.
make us read the report, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. This is supposed to be like that one joke from Melissa McCarthy, and that they paid her a lot for, right? That they put in the trailer, and you're like, I want to see that. Maybe it's the funniest part of the whole movie. So what's next? This goes to the town staff. They get to review it, and then we have our Bring It All Together meeting, which they'll cover the agenda for a little bit later. And then you will all get the plan, the existing conditions report for your review. And hopefully you like our colors, our photos. I took quite a few myself while I was out here trying to enjoy the summer sun this past summer. But that's what we have for you this evening. Do you have any questions about the existing conditions? If it's about the objects, I can't give you an answer.
No, but I guess it's more for the current, future-looking plan. But in terms of the built systems, was there any mention about wind at that time, 2010? For like in the utilities?
So utilities is within built systems. It's built utilities and public services. There's not as much about alternative energies in this upcoming existing conditions, besides the mention that with some of the offshore development, that there is additional sewer being laid ahead of CWMP timelines. But that's what is mentioned so far. We can review that as a team, though.
Carly?
Yes.
You referred to this as the trailer to get us interested, but I think
Yes.
you made a comment just a moment ago, I think, to the effect that we actually don't have access to the report to read yet.
Not yet.
Okay, thank you.
Elizabeth and team get to see that first. Yeah, you have to like and
bite your
subscribe.
tongue.
It's
I have a question. So in the population, is there any information about health outcomes or anything like that, health and wellness?
So I can't speak to that right now. I did not write that section. I don't believe there is at the moment, but we can also convene with that, talk about it as a team. Any other questions? Otherwise, I will turn it back over. I believe now we're going to speak to Kyle, where he will review survey results to date.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kyle Pedicini, Community and Economic Development Planner. I'm just going to give you a brief update on the survey demographics, updating you on the last report I gave at the last meeting. The surveys will be open through this weekend. I think we're going to be closing them Sunday night. So far, we've gotten 1,569 survey responses, including 34 Portuguese ones and 4 Spanish ones. So we're pretty encouraged by the results. Just running through we have slides on this, right? Yeah, just running through some of the interesting notes. For age, we got 123 responses from people under the age of 25, which was encouraging. Most folks were from Barnstable, which was nice to see, but if they weren't, they did have some sort of connection to the town. Pretty even split amongst the different villages, most from Centerville and Hyannis, as you'd expect. We had, I think, 117 responses from people who indicated they own a seasonal home in Barnstable. We did hear more from renters. I think getting out the every door direct mail helped that. We got 146 responses from renters. Gender, we did end up with more results from women than men. I would note that there are more women than men in the town of Barnstable. It's 51.5% is our female population in Barnstable. Pretty good spectrum of people working full-time, part-time, and retired. It's good to see different education levels, different races, and different language backgrounds. So I thought it was pretty encouraging, a good cross-section of demographics. And I'm happy to answer any further questions on that.
I have a question. In terms of the village breakdown, I feel like I asked you this before, but what is the breakdown of the population of each village compared to the responses?
Yeah, I didn't do a percentage versus percentage breakdown, but I can, and I can send that out if you'd like. That's not a problem at all.
I feel like it would be interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
When you talk about people who are residents and non-residents, where did you put summer residents? In residents or non-residents?
In terms of are you a Barnstable resident?
Yeah.
It kind of depended on how people interpreted that question. The question was, do you live in Barnstable? So, if I'm remembering back, so some people might have indicated that they were, but they're actually summer residents. So it's a little tough to say because it kind of depended on how people interpreted the question.
Do you actually know the overall population of Barnstable?
Yeah, I think we just heard it's
you did.
40, a little over 48,000
Oh, okay.
from the
I
last
put that down.
census.
48,000. I put that down in a different spot. Thank you.
Yeah.
How do you feel we did in terms of response? We sent out a lot of cards.
Yeah, I thought we did pretty well. I mean, it is kind of a long survey, so you're asking, for people to commit 5-10 minutes, and to get 1,500 plus responses, I thought was pretty encouraging. We targeted 1,000. We wanted to get at least 1,000, so we surpassed that mark. So we thought it was a successful data collection exercise.
I have a question. On the housing, only 9.5% of respondents were renters. How does that fit in the actual ratio? How does that fit with the ratio of actual units rented?
Yeah,
I
that's a
mean,
good
is that-
question. I can do the same thing with the village one and give you a breakdown based off the census. And I'll get that back to you guys.
What was the percentage that you gave of summer residents, of people who said they were summer residents?
Yeah,
Was
so-
it 30?
We had 117 responses from people who indicated they own a seasonal home in Barnstable.
Okay, so less than 10%.
But again, that could be more because people could have said that they lived in Barnstable and that's actually a seasonal home. So if there's nothing else, I believe I'm passing it off to, is it Kate?
Good evening, Kate Maldonado, Assistant Director of Planning and Development. Since our last meeting together, we have achieved really our core outreach going to each of our villages as of last week. Certainly thank you to all of our members who've attended at least one or more than one meeting. We appreciate your presence and your support at those meetings. More specifically, we had our Osterville workshop. We had our winter open house, which was fantastic. That was at HYCC. We were able to grab people of the community who were there for some of the games, and we had our comment walls out and some fun activities. So that was a really great participation. And then we also met with our Marston's Mill Civic Association. We were in West Barnstable and Centerville. So we've been busy really trying to capture those core comments and feedback from residents at the village level, talking about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges here as a whole, as the town of Barnstable, also with opportunity to talk about our specific villages. And then as far as upcoming, and next month, we're going to meet with the Barnstable Association for Recreational Shellfishing. They've requested an opportunity to learn more about the local comprehensive plan. And certainly while I say that we have achieved this core outreach meeting level, if there's any other opportunities that you're aware of, we would love to meet with any other organizations across town. So speaking of that core outreach that we've achieved thus far, before you this evening, you have a pretty hefty packet that Jim presented earlier at the beginning of this meeting that represents a compiled document with all the comments to date over the last 5 or so months. For members of the public who are here tonight, that document is also available with the meeting materials for this evening's meeting, so everyone is welcome to see that. It's organized starting by village. So again, with those robust conversations that we had on a village level, talking about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, as well as any general comment. And then the latter section, the last section, the townwide, that has all of the comments today as far as just general comments on our website, the barnstablelcp.com. We still have our general public comment box that's open, and we do see a lot of members of the public submitting comments there. So in the packet is all of the general comments that we've received to date, I think as of last week, and certainly we'll work to update that as we do receive frequent comments. We also have responses to our comment walls. We posted those around town. We had them at the Adult Community Center, at the high school, and so some people were able to comment on the comment walls themselves. We also had the QR code so that you could respond to those questions online. So that was your favorite road, where you would take a visitor, just try to figure out what our residents really value and treasure here in the town of Barnstable. Also under the townwide comments is some of the events that weren't specific to a village. So at the beginning of this, we went to the Community Safety Day, Hyannis Open Streets, where we did a quick questionnaire. The same, Jim was out at the youth soccer and did the same questionnaire again as another opportunity to obtain some feedback from our residents. Jim and Kyle attended the Barnstable High School, and they were able to get some vision statements from some of our students, and then our winter open house. So certainly we appreciate your review and all of your participation today of this document, and we'll be reviewing this document as we work towards achieving and developing our vision based on all of the comments to date. And I'd also note that if any members of the committee or members of the public attended any of the meetings and there's maybe a note or a comment that's missing or that they would want edited, we're always more than always more than willing to make those edits as well. I know you're probably digesting all 95 pages, but hopefully it's in a form that is structured well and easy to interpret, and always willing to hear some comments on suggestions.
It's very well put together.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl.
Well, at the Katuitt meeting, there were a lot of topics brought up that were more immediate than the long-term plan. And I noticed that in some of the other villages also. Is that going to be separated out, the things that don't really apply to the LCPC and things that you should be talking to your counselor about?
Yeah, and I think that this is a great effort to review all the comments, mostly as we're working to achieve the goals in the phase 2. So I think that's a great point, Fran, that as we're working towards those goals, really trying to digest these comments and figure out which ones really should be leading us towards the goals that we want to establish, and even our vision statement too. Susan?
I wasn't able to make it to the recent Centerville meeting, but the information that I got back was that people were very impressed with the people that ran the meeting and how that was a great meeting. So that was good to hear.
Thank you.
And then I did go to one meeting with the Marston's Mills Civic Association, and there was one thing that they talked about that I didn't see reflected in here, which was housing and the Marston's Mills Elementary School property.
Mm-hmm.
That seemed to be a big topic of conversation. People wanted to see something happen to that. People wanted to see housing there and maybe retail or something, and something for the village, but they did not, I don't think, want to see really intense housing. But there was a lot of talk about that, and I didn't see that in here.
Thank you for your point. That certainly was a discussion, and I'll make sure, I know I included housing, but I'll make sure that I specifically mention at that location at the school. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? And certainly, please let us know if there's any comments that are missing or any suggestions. But I think this will be a really great exercise in digesting as we work to finish our vision and even start thinking about some goals for the future.
Actually, hey, I do have one question. It just occurred to me. I have scanned through it. Do you have anything that correlates between all the? Oh, you do at the end of it. Brings it all together, right? The whole town.
So it's not essentially a summary. The townwide is basically anything that was submitted, like general public comment or the common walls. But as we read through all of the comments, we can start to think through patterns that we're seeing both at a village level and as the town as a whole.
That's what I was looking for. Was there something that kind of plucked out the things that were repeats almost throughout?
That's something that we can certainly work on.
I'm not trying to add more work to your
No,
plate. You've got a lot
no,
to
it's a
do.
great exercise, and that's, kind of the next step in this. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Steve, can I make a comment?
Certainly.
I want to congratulate Jim for, no, you can come. I'm reading the high school AP government comments, and in comment number 3, vision statement, they came up with 3 vision statements. It's very entertaining.
Yeah, it was. It was an entertaining exercise for Kyle and I going there. They were very engaged throughout the session, and yeah,
Page 88 for committee members, if you want to see.
Each of the groups had their own twist on the vision, but it was good. And Cheryl, great comment just now, because that's next on our agenda, bringing it all together. So, so the coordination of the Bring It All Together meeting. So as you guys can clearly see, there's been a ton of work that this committee has done over the past 5 months to get out to try and understand the qualitative data that this town holds as their values, their concerns, their opportunities. As you hear from our consultants, we'll have an existing conditions report that will really hit on all the quantitative data and discussion. So now we have the qualitative, the quantitative, the 5 months of really reaching out to as many people as possible, and we're trying to bring it all together here with a holistic session, likely at the end of February, early March, where we're going to hopefully bring in the community again and have a discussion of what are those trends that we've heard throughout town. What are the trends in patterns that we've seen in our conditions over the past 10 years? What are the opportunities that we have for us here in Barnstable? Ultimately, what is our vision for 2023, 2024, beyond? So with that in your package, you have an agenda, a draft agenda, I should say, that spells out what we're thinking about in terms of a visioning workshop. So it's a 2-pager back and front that begins to lay out a platform for us to engage the public once again, to come together and develop at least the framework for vision. Ultimately, this committee will develop that final vision. But understand, this workshop is intended to understand all of the material that you've received over the past 5 months and present it to not only this committee once again, but the public as a whole, and work through a vision. So this is what we're envisioning as a setup for the visioning workshop. We're thinking a 2-day setup, but originally we were thinking about 2 days, with it being you come to one and then it builds off it on the second one, but we were concerned about attendance and the different practical aspects of that. So we're proposing here a in-person session and a virtual session, thinking that, again, just like what the patterns that we've done throughout this past 5 months, reaching out in any way possible to get as much attendance as possible and as many voices as possible. So the thought is an in-person session where we'll run through a presentation of, again, our all of the stuff that you've received over time, including the existing conditions, and then breaking out into activities to develop out what ultimately will come together with hopefully some draft visions for this committee's consideration. So you have your agenda here that's proposed. Tonight, I know you only received this not too long ago, so we certainly don't have to finalize this tonight, but we're hoping to finalize this fairly soon. So I think as you're looking through this, if there's any comments, concerns, please share those with staff so we can develop those out and finalize an agenda so that we can bring it all together and promote all the hard work that this committee's done over the past 5 months. Any questions on the workshop itself or the agenda itself?
So
Chip?
if,
Sorry, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the in-person meeting would be here in this room, or?
So we're debating on the location, and we'd be interested in your thoughts. I think we're thinking the adult community center. They have the big room there, so we're hoping to get a really good attendance. So something slightly larger than this that we could bring people to.
One question I have is just in terms of help with the conversation to sort of digest all of the results and the public comments that have already gone into the input. How do we avoid kind of recreating the wheel and kind of starting from scratch, essentially? I mean, it would be nice to have some sort of boundaries or at least, a direction, because I can see, the more input, the better, but also certain people may be entering the conversation at various stages of the conversation, which can potentially detract from where we're trying to get to. So I'm just trying to think of the logistics of it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So I think the intent here is for our consulting team to start to sift through this as you are doing the qualitative and quantitative data and bring forward some of the trends, and perhaps we can present that in a manner that you can get it in advance, that we can give to the public, so that they are well informed before. So yes, if this is the first they've heard of the local comprehensive plan, they want to get involved, we have a nice handy, essentially a handbook form, for lack of a better term, that we could present a lot of the stuff that we've heard, if that's something that you'd be interested in.
Excuse me, I think it would be great to give people like a one-page thing on what's the local comprehensive plan, and then, a sort of a summary of what the gist of the meeting is and the various values and that sort of thing. And then with a note that says, when you think of something when you get home, this is what you do, because people are going to do that.
Yeah, how to stay involved in the process.
Yeah, and how, when you reflect on the meeting and what everybody has said, what do you wish you had said or thought of at the time?
I think that's a good idea. It's a very good idea.
Absolutely.
I have a question. Wendy actually just mentioned this. Would it be better if we had time to digest all this that came out, and that if we could run through and kind of form a framework before these 2 sessions that you have for the public, so that at least you're starting from a jumping off point, that it's kind of like we're on the diving board, and then people can take the pieces from that and give their input on that. Because I just kind of fear that if you're starting all over again with, this is what a local comprehensive plan is, and then you go into everything else, and people have already done survey and stuff, it's just going to be a reiteration of throwing spaghetti on the wall. Hopefully not, but I'm afraid so. And I think if we can come up with a real basic, even something like this, that we may not even all agree on, but a new version of that, and then lead the public through why the components of the paragraph or 2 paragraphs or whatever, or maybe it's a 4-paragraph thing and their challenge is to get it down to 1, and why the components are in there, and what it's based on and stuff. And then they feel, at least the public then is being very constructive in targeting the vision based on, committee homework, I guess, or something. I don't know. Do you want to refine that in any way?
Well, no, I just wanted to be clear that this was for a larger group than us.
Oh,
right?
yes, yes.
Yeah, so to have us maybe do the exercise first and see what we come up with, and then stamp draft all over it, and then engage a wider audience to maybe refine it, or they could go off in a whole nother direction, but it just might give some framework. I don't know.
I think that if the committee agrees, I think that could be a perfect opportunity for a February LCP meeting as a visioning workshop. Now that, this is your first opportunity to really get all the pieces together, perhaps right before, a period before a visioning workshop for the town as a whole, we have an introduction visioning workshop for this committee to kind of lay that groundwork and bring it to the town as a townwide.
Is there a reason not to do that? I mean, from a consultant's perspective? I don't want to step on toes anywhere. I'm just, I don't want to shut anything down.
I think we could certainly have that conversation with our consultants too, but I think that's, it sounds like a great next step. We'll have some conversation and we can report back to you. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, I like the idea of the committee going over the first of the meeting objectives, actually before the meeting, and even the second, but I'm not comfortable with us coming up with an actual vision, even a draft vision statement beforehand. I think that would kind of go against the idea that we're asking the community for their input.
I think it could go both ways. I mean, I think we've been thinking about this for a while, and it's not going to be easy to boil down something for us. So, I don't know. I mean, we just can't be married to anything that we present out there. We really just have to say, here's where we are.
Right.
What do you think? And we could get fed back something totally different. Just have to be prepared for that.
Except that if you put something out there, then people are going to be reacting to that and criticizing that rather than thinking up their own ideas about what should be in it.
Well, that's what you hire consultants to help you figure out that process.
You're speaking about a launching off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The draft that
Yeah.
generates conversation.
So I think that all great points. So we can certainly work with our consultants on what they may recommend as best practices and report back to you. I think either way, it sounds like a good session before the visioning workshop, where depending on the scope, we'll have kind of an introduction to the visioning workshop and refine the scope based on the best practices. Seems to make sense to me. Anything else, Deb?
I mean, I just want to add, I think one of the things that we were talking about did sort of blend what I'm hearing from the committee and that we were sort of talking about was that I do think, and I'm not sure if it sort of got reflected in the final outline, but that, the public would have the opportunity to hear directly from you all in terms of what you heard at your village meetings, what you read and see as themes in the survey, in the packet that you just got. So, you're not hearing it from us or our consultant, but you're hearing it from you all who have been engaged in this. So, that was, I think, an option in terms of how we were thinking about structuring it. So I just want to put that out there.
I agree with Felicia's point, and Wendy, I 100% understand where you're coming from, but I think clearly it's incumbent on us as committee members. We're the folks who stepped up and, volunteered to sort of guide the process. So I think it's probably, our responsibility to have some framework and hopefully reflect what we've heard, like you just mentioned, and then obviously fully recognizing that anything that is put forward is strictly a draft, as Wendy had mentioned multiple times, which I think makes a lot of sense.
So maybe it doesn't go to the level of formulating a vision statement, but, I think we went to all these meetings, there were commonalities and themes and things that came out, and I think, I think that, I think that should be acknowledged, like people who have participated in this acknowledge that we heard you, we listened, here there are things we saw across the board, here's how I'm interpreting it, like, is that correct? Am I on the right track? Are there things that I'm missing? Should things be prioritized in a different way? And that's sort of how I see, here's the things in our 2010 plan that, we thought were great and weren't, like, how do we put this all together into something for the next 10 years?
Francis?
I just wanted to say, couldn't we have just a generic vision statement? I don't think that would put people off if it was clearly stated that this is a boilerplate, generic vision statement. And, because I think they do need some sort of framework to be able to understand what we're trying to come up with.
And I mean, I think we have, it's important to think about the fact that this is an update. We have a 2010 vision statement. So I think we do have a starting point for some of this in terms of coming up with something. I think we want to acknowledge that what we're doing is building off an existing land use framework. So if we're going to start with something, my suggestion would be to start with, and I think, again, that's probably reflected in the highlights, to start with what we had in 2010 and then say, is this relevant? What do we want to build on? How do we reflect the current conditions of today?
I think you have a good point there, because it is something that was a guideline then. So really all we're doing is amending and updating, and what else needs to go in there that wasn't put in then.
I mean, I have other questions, but if No. I mean, I think what I would love to hear from you is, how do we make this successful? Are we on the right track in terms of thinking about structuring this for one in person, one virtual? Like, let's talk specifics, like what time, what times do we hold these? What do we do to get people to come to these meetings? We know, people come to meetings when, they feel very strongly about something. It's a little bit harder to come to meetings when you're talking about something so generic. What's the pull? What's the hook to get people here? What are our measures of success for these meetings? We'd love to have this framework laid out and sort of endorsed by this committee. I think what we were thinking, again, and I'm sorry if Jim just covered this, but, was a sort of an earlier afternoon meeting for in-person, something right after school. We've talked to Barnstable Rec, something where we could partner with them, maybe for, some sort of family event for people with kids, something that we have dinner at, so people can sort of check the box in terms of after school and dinner and coming together. We know 2 hours is a long meeting, but I think if we put all of those pieces together, it's not right. We've been holding some big public meetings lately. I've been getting a lot of feedback, where's the Zoom option? So I think that's kind of how we got to the two. But obviously it's a different sort of strategy when you're asking people to engage virtually. What information do we give ahead of time so people can come prepared? How are they going to look at it? So I just love any committee feedback on sort of that challenge.
Megan?
Is there any possibility of having, I think I've talked with a couple of our council members about this, if we're going to have an hour-and-a-half meeting in the evening, is there any possibility of providing childcare?
Yeah, so we're talking to Barnstable Recreation to try to untangle that. That's probably, that's something that they do. They hold events for families and children on a regular basis. So I had a conversation with our director of community services, and they could probably they were willing to talk to us about hosting a Barnstable Recreation event in conjunction vision with this, where we would have something for kids and family. And I think that's a really good theme, because I think that was something that we heard consistently throughout our village meetings that really surprised me, was that people are looking for ways to connect, things to bring their kids to. So I think it's sort of a really, if we can make that come together, a really nice response to some of the comments that we've heard so far.
If there is an event that they hold for kids, is it going to be at the same place?
Right.
Okay.
And that's why we're looking at the BACC, because it's got a couple of big spaces, that you could sort of partition off with some smaller rooms, a Barnstable Adult Community Center. So I think that's a good option. Yeah, I'm not going to say we have it planned out, because we don't, but we're having those conversations, and I'm optimistic.
I like the idea of two meetings. I think I like the idea of a Zoom meeting first to maybe, you talk about a draw, so maybe we use that as the setup with the expectation that the in-person meeting is the meeting where we sort of get closer to a vision.
Yeah.
At least that way people understand, okay, here's the process. We're actually, providing an avenue for anybody that, to make themselves available, with the expectation that the final meeting in person is where we hope to come to a closer vision statement ultimately.
Yeah, I think ultimately that synthesis probably is easier to do in person. And we were even talking about like a follow-up, do the draft vision statements that we come up with, do we ultimately, put those out for public comment and post those and allow those to come back? So we know everybody's not going to be able to come to the meetings, but how are ways we can send those out and make them more broadly available? Good.
So, Steve, through you, Steve, I just think you really need to, you guys are doing a magnificent job with community outreach, so you really need to differentiate what this is, because they feel like they've already gone to a meeting, they've already told you there are 80 million comments.
Yeah.
So how can we, other than pizza and childcare, what am I going to get out of this meeting, Yeah.
I do have to say that in-person meeting, it being not, like, during work hours is very limited. I mean, you're going to lose a lot of people from that. So I recognize that there's challenges with any time of day, but if that's like the final synthesis meeting, you're going to miss a big chunk of people, because nobody's going to take off work to come to this. I mean, unless there's Chez Antoine, maybe.
So a little later,
good food.
A little later in the day, you feel like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the family part, so I don't know how hard that is, right after school to kind of fill that time. But I just feel like if, I work till 5 and I couldn't leave work to go to something like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, we thought maybe some of the hook was, we could get people who, would be willing to go to this as a event if they're participating as a business, and they could take off at 4:30 instead of at 4 instead of 4:30 and go directly into it. But all right,
Jackie?
Francis?
Oh, I was just going to say, families that do things after school, they do a great many things. They come to doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, soccer, football, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts. Take your choice, so.
Yeah, no, it's tough. And, we did one last night at 7, and I heard a lot of like, wow, 7, like 7 to 9. I mean, I got a lot of comments that felt too late. So this is what I'm saying. It's hard to find the right time, but, we'd love to hear from you what you think that is that has the strongest reach.
I guess what I'm saying is, if we could not represent the in-person meeting as being more important than the virtual meeting, would be probably good.
We could do 2 during the day. We do the Zoom one and then do, because there's a lot of retired people that would like to come during the day. But, I mean, it is Cape Cod. But then so they would like more in the daytime when it's lighter as well. But then another fair point was brought up that a lot of people with kids, that's when they want to go out. So that would be another possibility, perhaps. That one over there.
Felicia, yep.
Steve, this wasn't on time of day, I'm sorry. Do you want to take another question on that?
Sure.
I just have a comment on time of day. 5 to 7 with pizza. But also, if we put out some priorities maybe as a teaser or something, that people could react to?
Megan?
If we do put out some kind of framework, and I like the idea of like 4 paragraphs down to 1, because I don't want to I'd like the public to independently add their own thoughts. Would that be out for public comment, kind of like the public's coming to this meeting, but for those who can't attend? So that, I guess that's my question, if that's possible, or if that kind of is just.
You guys jump in, absolutely, but I feel like that's sort of what we talked about, is that we'd use these 2 meetings to start to synthesize, maybe a handful of visions. And then, we put those back out to the public for feedback or voting or some sort of approach, because again, we recognize that we're only gonna reach a limited cross-section with the in-person meeting, but we want sort of a broader and, quick and easy way for people to respond after the fact.
So one question would be, after the 2 meetings, the subsequent LCP meeting, committee meeting, is where we define the vision ultimately?
Right. Yep. And then I think that between that and the review of the existing conditions workshop, we would sort of envision our first sort of official committee vote on those 2 chapters.
Yes, in the back.
I know it's a public comment, just a question.
Come on up and identify yourself and feel free to speak.
Sure, Bob Schulte from Centerville. Just a question on the location. Is there any reason why you wouldn't consider the Barnstable High School Performing Arts advertising that? I mean, it's a town-wide issue. You want as many people as possible. I attend a lot of events at the senior center, and that's pretty limiting. So just a thought, you might want to consider that for a larger, get a larger attendance and advertise that.
Sure, thank you.
Steve?
Yep.
I just had a question on the breakout groups. Those are just going to be, so I'm picturing this virtual meeting where, say, you have 50 people or 72 people that have dialed in, okay? So you're going to break out 6 people per breakout group, 10 people? I mean, how's that going to work? Is it going to be by village? Is it going to be by age group? Is it going to be by just, hey, the first 10 go here and the next 10 go there, and there's a facilitator for each one of those? They just go to a different room, quote unquote?
Well, if it was by village or town, people would have to register ahead of time and enter their information. So
Yeah, so it'll be a random breakout group with one of us as a consultant facilitating that conversation. So it won't be random necessarily. We'll all be assigned one as consultants, and it will be no more than 10 people. Usually we look at 8 to 10 people, 10 sometimes too much, because the latter people speak up quite a bit. And then the facilitator's job is to actually call out the more quiet folks.
So I guess what remains is maybe the dates and the locations. Sounds like we're in agreement in terms of the number of meetings then.
So just circling back around on dates, I'm sorry, I don't have the sheet in front of me, but it was generally, we were targeting, and I think what we talked about last time was February 28 and March 1st. So you guys can tell me if those feel right. I think we gave you guys 2 ranges last time, and this was the one in terms of the extended number of workshops that we ended up doing that looked right. But we'd appreciate your feedback on that. If not now, probably we could do a follow-up after the meeting. But those dates and times have been confirmed, at least availability for us and our consultant team.
Just for people's information, February 28th, March 1st is a Wednesday, and
28th would be a Tuesday.
28th should be a Tuesday, yeah.
The 28th is the Citizens Leadership Academy in the evening.
It happens to be Planning and Development's night as well.
And it's at the JFK Museum, which is why I know it.
So we recognize that as an issue, and that we might have to ask for a trade if that's ultimately what we land on as the evening workshop. But again, we were exploring a number of daytime possibilities, but and open to other ideas.
Can I ask another question?
Certainly.
So would we, are you looking for the committee members to have roles in these two things, no matter when they happen? Or would this just be, I don't mean just be, would this be consultant/staff led?
Yes, I think to the last question, I think the LCPC's role would be to attend and be part of those breakout groups, whereas the facilitators of the breakout groups would be consultants, and we would need to talk to Elizabeth about what she feels like their staff would want to be. They're oftentimes like overseers, kind of when it's in person, we call them like floaters, kind of being able to hear what all the groups are saying, and not be just with one group if they want to have an overarching purview, but we'll have to see what, part of our consulting team is a firm called Dotson and Flinker, and they'll be leading the visioning workshop. This is what they do, and they will have they will let us know based on preliminary registration how many facilitators that they're going to need for the number of breakout rooms that they anticipate. Elizabeth, I have a question. In terms of the calendar, were we anticipating this group meets once before the visioning workshops?
Well, I think that was the discussion we just had with Jim, and I think the idea is, the idea is to synthesize some sort of findings, I guess, before we go into this, that it sounds like, yes, that would be a possibility for a February LCP meeting.
Yep, go ahead.
I think it would be great if the public that comes to these meetings, especially the in-person one, could see who's on the committee. So I've been to meetings where, there was somebody leading it, but there were people sitting behind them, and I think that would be great.
I think so too. And, we know this is a big group and maybe not everyone is going to make it to both of them, but I mean, yes, we definitely think your presence at these are.
Well, and on the Zoom, we can change our name and put, the committee member name.
And they can get us names on a piece of paper, too.
I'd just like to participate, just in case if somebody have a problem with the translation and things like that, we have, somebody who can translate for them, so.
Thank you, Carlos. So it sounds like we need a preliminary date prior to the two sessions, so we need to have a pre-vision meeting?
Before the first date, is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah. That's
Sounds-
just
sounds like
an
it.
ask, yeah.
And is that something that everybody feels comfortable doing? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I do too.
I do too.
So then we can talk about timing for that. I mean, probably proximity to the first session at the very least, I would imagine.
And I know we have a school vacation week in February, so, I mean, we will look for your feedback on dates.
Is school vacation the third week of?
Third week?
Okay.
Oh, I don't know.
This is the hardest thing we do.
Council meets what, first and fourth? No, first and third, or second and fourth? First and third?
So may I propose that I put out a poll for everybody?
Yeah.
Because I think it would be important also to have the consultants present too, so we can run through.
What a good idea.
All right, I'll send that out first thing in the morning. I appreciate it.
So next item is the update on the housing needs assessment and housing production plan. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I can give that. So we continue the process to sort of update this parallel document that we know will sort of inform the goals and findings in the LCP. We got an initial draft report from the consulting team that they presented to the Housing Committee. Staff as well as the Housing Committee are taking a look at that. We feel like we need to just go through that draft really thoroughly to respond, make sure that it responds to what we think the local conditions and priorities are. I think the one major thing we heard from our housing committee was to try to narrow down some of the strategies in there. I think there were 30 plus strategies that were initially drafted to make those really meaningful. And, you know, I think Jim spoke very thoughtfully before about the value of having really well thought out strategies that have metrics in terms of how we can measure them to be accomplished. So we feel like we have some work to do a little bit internally on the draft that's been produced thus far. So that is what we're working on, and we'll continue to work on with our housing committee before we publish a final draft. The next step in the process will be a joint meeting between the planning board and the housing committee, and we want to commit to giving the general public at least a month to review the draft before that meeting. So they will be invited to speak to both of those groups together in terms of their feedback on the plan. So based on the planning board's committee schedule and the additional review time that we need, we're thinking that meeting will probably be scheduled for late February or early March. So that's where we're at with that.
Okay, thank you. I do see some members of the town council present, as well as some other folks from the public. Is there anyone here who would like to make any comments at all? Okay. So with that, other than our next meeting date to be determined, anything else from any committee members?
Actually,
Yes, Carlos.
so I was talking to Amanda and Bob last night, and I'm not confused, but I'm kind of concerned about, we talk a lot about infrastructure, which is great. They're doing a great job. But parallel to this, we need to talk about the social issues happening here in the Cape. If you're going to plan infrastructure, you're going to plan also for those social issues to be solved. And I don't see that. I don't see the discussion here between us. So how is that, am I confusing you here, or?
I guess, is it a reflection of what the comments we've heard are? Because I don't, I feel like we're kind of reacting or digesting when people are asked to, to give their feedback.
Right.
Maybe, to your point, maybe they don't understand that that's feedback that we're looking for or should be included. So I don't know how to answer that other than.
Well, no, my point to you, actually to all of you, is, all this infrastructure and great things happen in Barnstable, and we're not looking the other side of the whole coin here, which is people are hungry in town, people are coming out of jail, have no place to go. I mentioned this before. We have a lack of beds for people who has mental health issues. So when are we going to discuss this? Is that after we talk about this, we're going to end up having a different discussion after the infrastructure? I think the thing is parallel. We have to do both things.
That was sort of why I asked about the health outcomes with the, when we're looking at the inventory. Because in the 2010 report, there was a Health and Human Services section. And so that's why I was sort of inquiring, because I agree with you, that's part of this. It's part of our.
So not only to talk about local business starving winter, right, Amanda?
Yeah.
So, and we have plenty of business in the summer. So when can we talk about this? So we need to discuss those things, in my opinion. So I don't know about the committee, what they think, so.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree that those are obviously important topics and they're very visible, circumstances. So I guess,
So in
how do we incorporate it into the?
in this process, where does that land? Like and I think you've probably gone over this with us before, but just, is it, right now we're doing an inventory and then we look at that and then we're diving deeper into those things to inform our next, the next
version of the
And please, I don't want to take from what you guys doing is an unbelievable job. And thank you very much. I don't want to sit down here and listen to the report you me. I want to participate. My only way to participate is try to help people that need some help out there. And I like to have the discussion if it's possible, because it's not happening right now.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I can only redirect that because it's something that obviously it hasn't been brought up and hasn't been put forward. So in terms of where we can incorporate this into our discussion before we take another step, then definitely let's talk about that. Megan, sorry.
I think, so it's a little embarrassing that hasn't been talked about more. And looking at the Health and Human Services from the 2010, I know we have the Human Services Committee, and there's been a lot of work on that, so maybe we could come together and talk about what we've been doing on that end. I know, Cheryl, that there's been a lot on that front, and then I don't know how that would reflect in this upcoming vision, but yeah, that's kind of a necessary aspect.
Can I make a suggestion that might help? And I'm just putting it out there. Megan and Carlos and I are also serving on the Human Services Committee. And we've, sure, let me move it a little bit further forward so I don't break it. So just to clarify, Carlos, Megan and I are also on the Human Services Committee. And we have, as Megan said, done a lot so far, putting the groundwork down. And I have been spending weekends typing up the presentations that we've had, which cover a lot on that, not all of it, but so that we can then bring it together in Human Services. And I'm going to ask staff if there's a problem with it. I don't think there is, because where I understand it, we've got all these things that have been compiled through fantastic work, and a lot of contribution and a lot of interaction from the members here. But I'm happy to share that, because it's for the betterment of the town to try to figure it, is to share that information. So maybe you can, I think that might be an idea, because that brings in some of the more health aspects, mental, physical health, homelessness, we've directed it on, addictions, housing, and we also had some groups that service various different areas, like relief, and the directors from that. Is there any reason why I can't share it just for information, for discussion? I don't think there's any.
I don't think there's a problem with that. I guess.
I'd send it to staff.
Yeah,
for you and
let's
consider.
add it. Bob, I know you have a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Carlos's comment and maybe try to put it in the focus of what we're doing here, our mission here. All of the things that Carlos has mentioned and that Cheryl mentioned and other people have mentioned in terms of non-specifically land use issues, education, employment, job development, housing, food security, all those types of things. Everything that we do as a town or a community with regard to any of those things affect land use decisions. And every land use decision which we make affects how we address things like education and public health and all those types of things. So at some point, I don't want to mischaracterize Carlos's point, so correct me if I'm missing it. There has to be some thought of the bigger picture incorporated in this process while we're doing this process, so we don't end up 2 years from now with a comprehensive plan outlining how mostly land use decisions will be made over the next 10 to 30 years without figuring out, do we need more schools or fewer schools? Do we need more housing of a certain type or less housing of a certain type? How are we going to create jobs, and what sectors are those jobs going to be created in? At some point, I think we have to give some thought to some of those issues without getting into the weeds of developing an economic development plan, because that's a whole different animal than a comprehensive plan. But I think we have to give some thought to that, and I think that's the point, Carlos, you were trying to make.
Yes, basically, yes. And I just want to, whatever happened today in this town, Some people sweep on the rug sometimes, and you don't see it, okay? And I'm glad town council here today, because they know, I've been talking to a lot to Paul Cusack about this. People are hungry right now. People going back to the high school, kids going back to take a bag of food home because they don't have food home. So we have to pay attention to this. If this comprehensive committee is going to take 2 years to put a report together to be voted by the town council, those people are dead already. So we need to provide service somehow immediately and then work on it in order to make sure 2 years from now, we're not going to hurt these issues anymore. That's my hope.
Jennifer, did you have a comment?
I think that first of all, completely agree. I think that the Every Door Direct piece that we did send out asking for comments had things like healthcare and food insecurity and sort of key phrases to get people thinking about in terms of the survey response. And clearly, we're not getting those pointed answers through the survey. But I think more outreach to populations, particularly your committee, would be terrific because it clearly is a big issue.
They are showing up in here.
Okay.
Those issues are showing up in here.
But maybe not to the degree that I'm not sure we're reaching all those people to get those.
No, I'm just saying,
Right.
like, when we say, we are hearing, sorry.
Right.
We are hearing from the
Excuse me
public.
for a second. I'm not talking about the immigrant community, by the way. I'm talking about some whole population of Barnstable. They are there with the necessity of few things, basic things. Okay? The immigrant community, they have 2 or 3 jobs. They have plenty of money to buy food. It's not the issue here. So you know.
You're talking about human beings.
Right.
Yes, Avery.
In my way of plotting through this document, I created my own little document, trying to figure out, I created categories. And throughout this tonight, every now and I look at it, and including when Carlos is talking, and I see about half of the categories that the general people are talking about are health, human services, places for kids, recreation, like bigger picture stuff. So hopefully that comes in. But thanks for identifying it. The other thing related, or not related, but I think is really important is some of the, which we haven't talked about at all, are sort of more sustainable green energy things. This also has to be part of what we're talking about, not just because we have a wind plant, but bigger pictures.
I guess, Carl, my only comment is that the concerns that you have that are obviously real are critical concerns and immediate. I just wonder how, through a plan such as this, we could affect people that are in need now,
Well, Steve, maybe talking about this right now, maybe the town councils listen to us here, and somehow something's going to be done, And I've been talking to the town, to all the meetings I've been going to, and I feel sometimes people said, "Okay, Carlos, very good, sit down, let's talk about something else." I don't want to talk about something else. This is the problem right now, and we'd like to work on it right now. I do. Anyway, so if the committee allow me to work with you guys and try to come up with some solution just for now and planning for the next 10 years, we're going to be okay.
Okay. Megan, I saw you had a hand up.
Just a question again, on section 7 here. It says that CDBG funding has been provided for social services. Is there going to be some kind of metric there from 2010 up to now for comparison's sake? As far as spending goes.
I mean, for that particular funding source, yes. I mean, that's a very easy statistic to pull together. It's probably much bigger than that one question. But, I think, to Carlos's point, thinking about, how to tie in some of the concerns he has with some of the work that Health and Human Services has done. One of the groups that showed up very prominently in town council and who I've talked to about really what we're doing here, and our work on the housing production plan has been Barnstable No Place for Hate, which is already a consortium of a lot of those services. So I think we could have a really sort of great parallel discussion about how we build sort of a network coming out of this work, because, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Carlos. One of the things that I was very surprised to hear in a lot of the conversations that we had with our residents and with our villages was less about physical infrastructure and was more about social infrastructure. So, it's obviously something that our community is thinking about and struggling with and trying to find solutions with. So, sure, maybe we end up ultimately with a local comprehensive plan chapter on it, but, I do think there's sort of energy to address some of these, maybe through, through another process as well.
Sure, go ahead.
Elizabeth, may I ask I'm sorry, you have your hand up too.
Yeah, I agree completely with
Mike.
Carlos. Sorry, I agree completely with you, Carlos. I think that people don't necessarily think of the town as somebody that's providing human services directly, or, in terms of health, except for the health department, maybe. They think of those things as being more provided by private groups or nonprofits or whatever. And they do a good job, but the need is huge when you start talking about things like addiction and mental health and food insecurity. I think in terms of housing, yeah, people are getting it about housing, and everybody's trying to do something about it. But what I think would be really interesting would be to see something about existing conditions in some of those areas. And I think also to see the things that the Human Services Committee has been talking about, because I don't think people out there even realize that there is a Human Services Committee for the town.
You will get the reports, and I'm halfway through them now, but we also organize categories. Can I ask Elizabeth, and they're also available online, the videos on demand, and those are fascinating. Can I ask Elizabeth, though, the development block grant that you mentioned here, the CDBG, continually provided for social services, is there a specific way that's allocated?
It is. So the town of Barnstable is what we call an entitlement community. We get an annual designation. Lately, it's been around $300,000 each year. And it is for the purposes of making transformative investments in our communities to support those of low or moderate income. So we are required on an annual basis to put together an action plan for these funds. We are actually just about to start the action plan for the coming year, so it's a perfect time to advertise this and have this conversation. I will say I think the biggest struggle in administering these funds is finding partner agencies who have the capacity to spend federal funding because it is extremely administratively intense to be able to do this. So yeah, we certainly welcome you guys to, there's sort of an annual reporting process on what we've done in the past, and again, an annual look forward on how we're going to allocate our funds in the future. Since we've been, since I've been participating in oversight, we've had great partnerships with our housing authority in terms of improving the quality of our public housing stock. We partner with our police department to extend our community service office hours. We offer scholarships annually through Barnstable Recreation so people can participate in our youth programming with free of little charge. So those are just a couple of examples of the types of projects that we allocate those funds to annually, but we are certainly open. We struggle spending our annual allocation, so we're certainly open to a conversation on partnership.
So Elizabeth, Our last 8 meetings on human services was devoted to just that, developing partner agencies in order to address all these things. And I knew I'd forgotten one of the other people that had come was the police. We would be more than happy to help you with that plan.
We would love to. So again, we're just ramping up for the 2023 plan, so it sounds like.
Also, I will reiterate, having experience with this program, that it is incredibly difficult to deal with. So just, she's not kidding when she says the agency has to have the capacity to be able to deal with all of that stuff.
We ought to have a chat. I think it is. They do.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for that.
Just a final point. Sue and I are part of the Community Action Committee in Cape and Islands, so there's a lot of fund coming this way to those agencies. It's not enough. It's not enough. The problem is triple that it used to be. So we need to do something. We need a food pantry badly here in this Cape, in Barnstable, actually. So if it is a room for things like that in the future, think about that, because we're going to solve a lot of families' problem right here. So,
Thank you. Okay. That concludes our meeting. Motion to adjourn, please.
I so move.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you very much.